Okay, so let's just get the ball rolling and then we'll get people joining us along the way. So, welcome everyone who's connected. We're already having quite a few connections. That's very exciting to see. And thank you for showing your enthusiasm actually from the onset. And since the registration process, people have already been asking questions and having that interactivity going. So, thank you so much. Welcome to this also first Quadia webinar event. So for those who don't know me, my name is Astadjam Bamanga. I'm Quadia's communication and investor relations lead, and it's my pleasure to host that exciting event with you for you today. So for those who are based in Geneva, you may be familiar with our Quadia talks, events where we gather thought leaders, business leaders, to really come and share with us how sustainability, finance, and businesses can come together to create a new economy, or rather transition towards this regenerative economy that we really deeply believe in. So we thought that we would bring that same energy into this webinar today, really focus on solutions, leverage the experts that we have in our networks and fantastic people who are doing work on the field to really give back to the community and keep that spirit engaged and solutions oriented. So today's focus, or rather today's topic, happens in a very particular context, as we all know. So first of all, it's the fourth day of the Fashion Revolution Week. So it's a movement that is made up of designers, academics, business leaders, policymakers, brands, workers, fashion enthusiasts, a whole ecosystem of people who are really engaged in radically changing the way our clothes are consumed and produced. Second, yesterday was Earth Day, as you may be well aware of, and we've seen how the movement actually is really seeking having a second breath, especially in this context, and how everyone is really even more engaged towards bringing that change forward. And finally, the big elephant in the room, of course, it's COVID-19, which is really asking a lot of us to really change not only the way we live, but the way we work, the way we engage with our different communities, and how do we really make somehow the most of the current situation to really bring that acceleration needed for our economies towards a system that is fairer, kinder, more regenerative. And really do believe that we need a regenerative economy that creates more than it consumes. And at Quadia, we really do that through financing companies that operate in sectors in growing demands, such as clean energy, sustainable food, and circular materials, models and materials. So for today's topic, we know that the fashion industry is one of the largest polluting industries in the world. But as such, it actually holds also a lot of opportunities and solutions that are already here on the field, and people who are acting in initiatives actually that exist. So our discussion today, it's really to see how we can leverage those entrepreneurs and those companies and the initiatives that are accompanying them that are moving really the needles, and how we can really collectively be part of that growth and transformation. So once again, it's really my delight to have François Souchet from the MacArthur Foundation, and Marion, Schuppe, my fellow colleague at Quadia, today to talk to us about this really, really exciting topic and opportunities. And just finally, just one housekeeping note. We will be gathering your questions, guys, throughout the webinar. So please do make use of the Q&A button in your screens. I'll be collecting them and then sharing them with Marion and François at the end of the webinar, in our second part of the webinar rather. But if you do need clarification specific elements that either our speakers are addressing, please also let me know, and then I'll bring that forward if it's just a quick clarification. So let's just get into the meat of the topic today. So please, maybe a couple of words on each of you, how you work with circular fashion, circularity, and investing. Marion?
Hi everyone. So I'm working as an impact investment manager at Quadia, and I've been directly involved in investments in the circular economy area, especially in textile and packaging sectors in the past years. And that's given me the opportunity to have a good overview of the market and the trends while working on the field with these companies and innovators of the sectors that we will talk about later. And also for the past couple of years, I've also spent time on working on our impact management methodology and what we call the regenerative economy to understand what it means, to understand what it means for the companies in each sector and subsector, including circular textile, to contribute to this model.
Thank you. François?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me, and it's a pleasure to join this conversation. So I work with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. As a quick context, we are a UK-based charity with the mission to accelerate the transition towards a circular economy. We work with a global network of companies and education partners, etc. And my role at the foundation is to lead our work on circular fashion.
Thank you. Thank you for those introductions. So if you don't mind, I'll just jump right with you, François, to take from your presentation and what you do at the foundation. So maybe just to give a bit more context so that we really see what are the challenges, even though we want to be solution focused. Can you tell us maybe what factors contribute to that industry being one of the most polluting?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key factors of fashion being one of the most polluting industries is it's very linear operating model. So you create growth by making and selling more products. And basically what that leads to is overproduction and underutilization. What we've seen when we've studied the material flows in the fashion industry is that between 2000 and 2015, the global production of clothing has been multiplied by 2, while in the same time, the average number of time we wear the clothes that we buy has been decreasing by close to 40% globally. So there's a massive disconnect between what's being produced and how it's being used, which leads to massive waste and pollution. And actually, all those clothing that are being discarded early actually mostly end up in landfill or incineration. We've estimated that that rate of sending clothing to landfill is equivalent to like a truckload of garments that would end up in a landfill or incinerator every second at global scale, which is quite a very fast pace of consumption. And in addition to that, all the clothes that we buy and wear are relying very heavily on finite fossil resources. So a lot of plastics and petrochemicals are used, whether it's to make the fabric, which is a lot of PET, which is a type of plastics, to make the dyes that will color the garments we wear, etc., which leads to a lot of CO2 emission and water pollution.
Okay, that's very, yeah, actually the image of the truck every second is quite telling, I believe. And talking about solutions, I believe there are different initiatives that are being undertaken. There are different ways to name them, different terminologies that are being used. Could you maybe, before we jump into circular fashion in particular, give us maybe the different definitions or clarify what are the differences between sustainable fashion, ethical fashion, circular fashion? What are we talking about?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think often the term depends on your starting point. So the ambitions are always very similar. The ambition of sustainable, ethical, or circular fashion are really to make the fashion industry better for the environment, better for its workers. And if you start from social conditions, you will call it ethical fashion. If you start from environmental conditions, you might call it sustainable fashion. If you start from like materials, you might call it circular fashion. The way I like to see it is think about circular fashion as a way to deliver a better fashion industry and a way to create a fashion industry that is more sustainable, that is better for its workers. So circular fashion basically can be seen as a tool to achieve a sustainable and ethical fashion industry.
I'm taking notes at the same time. I don't want to miss anything, even though it is recorded and we'll be having the opportunity to really retake notes and make sure we gather all the information we're getting today. So talking about specifically then circular fashion, what would be the key principles that ensure that a company is operating with this framework?
Absolutely. So the way we've thought about circular fashion and the vision we have for circular fashion industries through three pillars. The first one is clothing is used more. So it's basically developing new business models that help creating more value from the clothes that are being produced. So that can include repair, re-commerce, rental, refurbishing, etc. So it's any aspect that enables to keep clothing used for longer or to be used more frequently. The second pillar is around clothing that is made to be made again. So it's basically when we create the clothing, think about what it will become. Think about how can you make sure that it won't become waste? How can it be disassembled? How can its material being either reused or recycled? And also, what are the infrastructure and developing the infrastructure that will need to be in place so that this happens in practice? And the last aspect that we see is around using safe and renewable resources. So as we said today, the fashion industry relies very heavily on fossil resources. And so we need to transition that to using safe and renewable resources, safe chemistry, renewable or recycled input when feasible. So those are the three aspects of circular fashion.
That's actually quite interesting, operating from these three pillars and having an axis through which look at those companies. So talking more from the investment side, Marion, now, what kind of, why would we consider circular fashion an interest as an area for investment?
Well, first, I would say the textile sector is huge. It's a huge mass sector. So is a fashion market. The fashion market was worth over 170 billion in Europe last year, and it's growing. And even better, the sustainable textile and the circular textile is growing even faster. We know that resale is growing almost 10 times faster than the traditional retail. We know that second-hand apparel market is growing very fast, much faster than the traditional apparel market, and it's expected to continue. So first, it's a growing mass market, and that's in itself an opportunity. And also, all these circular business models and companies that François was talking about are already on the market, are existing. So it's not like a dream; it's existing, and we know these companies, and they are able to have a huge impact, like economic impact, but also social and environmental. It's like the sectors of energy and foods, apparel and footwear and textile sector is like it's something important for all of us. We all wear clothes, we all use textiles. Europeans spend almost in average 15% of their budgets on clothing and household furnishing. So when you bring transformation in these sectors, you can have a huge impact. And also in terms of macroeconomics, the sector plays a huge and significant role in the European manufacturing industry. It's employing over 1.5 million people only in Europe. So it's definitely a sector, a way to have a huge impact, economic and social and environmental. And we see these opportunities, these companies are already working successfully in this sector. We know and we have good examples. We know these huge brands, for example, Patagonia or other leading companies that's already showing success. So there are opportunities, and all these companies, or many of them, are looking for funds and resources to scale up and to really use all their potential to bring this transformation of the sector that was pressing before the COVID-19 outbreak, and that are like more than ever relevant and necessary.
Yes, and actually you use that word opportunities. So talking about the different pieces, François was highlighting different challenges, excuse me, different challenges along the value chain and different areas where opportunities could be seen for these companies. So talking, if we go beyond and consider, for example, our regenerative economy perspective, where do you see those opportunities emerging for such entrepreneurs?
Well, I think there are opportunities all along the value chain, because there are challenges, social, environmental, and governance challenges at every step of this value chain, from resource extraction and the raw materials we are using today to produce the garments and the tech, to all the way to the end of life of the garments and how we manage this end of life, this the last the life cycle of the clothes, as François mentioned before too. So we see technologies and process and business model innovations based on strong, inclusive and fair business models, addressing all of these challenges across the value chains. And this, in my opinion, is the overconsumption of resources, so the over extraction, so the huge amount of waste which is discarded. And to tackle these issues, we need to produce better and also to produce less clothes from virgin materials. So there are many solutions to scale, because they are all already existing, but also to invent, develop, and implement, and all the around, like all these business models already mentioned: reselling, sharing, repurposing, taking back, and also developing new bio-based and biodegradable materials. So there are many things to many solutions that are opportunities for entrepreneurs, companies, and investors.
Sorry, just a question that has come, and I think we will take it with us in the Q&A session. Very, very interesting questions. You're going to be in the hot seat, guys, later on. So it'll be very exciting. But to really come up on the points that you just made, Marion, and maybe link it to a question to François. So we have these big opportunities really to engage, and some brands have already been doing that, and more are emerging, and there are those principles and those based on those 3 pillars that you mentioned earlier, François. So are there actually differences in integrating these principles, whether we're talking about an SME or we're talking about big corporations that are doing circular fashion?
I think the way you can approach integrating those solutions will be quite different. If you think about the large companies within the industry, they're very large ships, so they take a long time to really turn in terms of direction. But however, they've got a lot more resources and a broader workforce to actually dedicate to thinking and developing those solutions, while an SME may be a bit leaner in terms of resources, but more agile in terms of how it's being set up. So the way things can be approached will differ quite dramatically. And I think what's really important, regardless of the organization and the size of the organization is to understand where your core capabilities are and where you have like a specific area of expertise, and use that as a starting point in the transition, to then expand progressively and develop solutions more broadly. So if you think about like the three ideas, if you've got a long history of innovating on the business, or if you've got a very long history of becoming very, very expert at the chemicals and that you use and the materials that you source, then you can start from there and then expand into the other areas.
So okay, depending on that, you'd then set it up differently. But then I guess we talked about a lot about opportunities and growing markets and different way of integrations. Could you maybe tell us more about what kind of incentives there would be for companies to embrace this circular movement? You've already given some elements, but maybe tease us with something more. To both of you.
Marion, do you want to start?
We cannot hear you.
Sorry. As mentioned before, like there is clearly a consumer trend, very strong, with growing demand, especially also from the younger generations. They are really willing to adopt this new consumer habits and behavior, using renting, secondhand clothes. So like all the trends are here and are strong. And I think also it means, and we see it already in Europe, that the regulation will evolve. And we see already in Europe and in some specific countries, regulation going towards more circular textile and fashion sectors, with, for example, the ban of discarding clothes in France, with the new European Green Deal, including some circular roadmap, and targeting also and specifically at the fashion industry. So that's also something important for companies to take into account, because it will have like a bottom line effect also on their companies.
Thank you, François.
Absolutely. I think to the point that Marion made about the growing market around resale, around rental, that these markets are much more dynamic than the like standard retail market. I think it's Bain who estimated that currently 10% of the luxury market is actually made of resale, which is quite a significant chunk. And ThreadUp estimated that by 2028, the resale market in the US would be larger than the fast fashion market. So those markets are growing very quickly and are going to become huge. And when we did some economic estimate about like the impact of underutilization, we saw that currently the industry was leaving around half a $500 billion a year on the table for clothes that are underutilized and discarded too early to not be recycled. And I think there's also an increased pressure from governments, as Marion said, from the public on the industry to take bigger action on climate, and finding ways to do that while also creating a thriving business is really important, and circular economy can provide some great answers in that direction.
So it is a market demand, definitely, but also incentives that will come from regulation. So it's a mix of both, adding to that, to those opportunities you were mentioning earlier. If we come back to investment, or move forward to investment, we were talking about people getting into the field and being part of that movement. When we're talking about those companies that are emerging or already are on the field, what kind of return are we expecting for these companies, Marion?
Well, as we were saying, I think circular business models enable companies to generate like this triple value, financial, social, and environmental. So we expect attractive financial and impact returns, because like the companies are able to generate at the same time these values, this adding value. So we do not consider investing in circular business model and circular textile companies as only impact first. Not at all. For us, it will generate financial return as attractive as, or more attractive, given all we have said before, the trends of the market. Yeah.
That's a very comprehensive answer. And then if we, sorry, I am coughing, but it is not nothing to worry about. I just have a bit of dust. So going forward, we believe that those companies that you very rightly so said are positioning already themselves into the market and already starting to become the leaders of tomorrow. So how will the differentiation then be moving forward? How will they be able to remain competitive, or rather, how can synergies will be created in that world that will be embracing more and more circularity? Or Marion?
Well, like I think these companies, innovative companies, developing and scaling up these circular business models are enablers of the transformation, and are able to make the leading players of the field also adapt these business models and trends. And I think also we see many leading companies in the sector willing to adapt, or claiming they will adopt some like circular business models, or embrace circular trends. But I really think they need all these innovative smaller companies and innovators to do it. So that's where we see potential synergies, and that's also where we see our role as impact investors in this field, to support these innovators to scale up and be able to fully have this enabler role on the value chain.
Thank you. I hope if we have entrepreneurs in the audience are feeling quite excited and motivated to see all the support and the initiatives that are behind you to have that transformation. So let's get onto the field, to the nitty-gritty of what's happening right now. So maybe the question on everyone's mouth or mind at the moment is, how do you see the current sanitary COVID-19 situation impact the circular textiles industry? Both of you. So Marion?
Well, I think the impact is like the sector is hardly hit now, but at every or many step on the value chains, from production, from the production and manufacturers all over the world, including in countries which are facing struggles and difficulties as everyone in this situation. But like I'm thinking of China, India, that are large producers and suppliers, but also some countries in Europe, like such as Portugal. So it has a large impact from the producers, and also on the social side, given that many workers in these manufacturing companies are also vulnerable, and more vulnerable to facing this crisis. But the impact then goes all along the value chain with the retailers closing because of social distancing and standard like barrier measures. Also, like consumers maybe not willing to spend money on not necessary goods. But at the same time, there are also impacts that can be positive in terms of consumer behavior changes. So I think all the value chain will be hit, and the impact will be maybe difficult for some players, but also can be seen as next as a source of opportunities for circular business models in this field.
Thank you, François.
Yeah, I think I completely agree to what Marion was saying, that the crisis is hitting the industry in a very, very difficult way, and it's very early to say exactly and to have a perspective on what exactly will happen after the crisis. And what we observe is very often in times of crisis, like thinkers think and expect things to change dramatically, and more often than not we go back to normal. So hopefully this time we'll be able to transform things for the better on the other side of this crisis. There are a few things that the crisis is putting in focus, especially when it comes to the industry. The supply chain is definitely one, whether it's the impact it has on the livelihood of many people across different geographies, and how important it is to really think more broadly about like partnership and working together across the industry. That's become a lot more in focus, but also it has shown some of the fragile aspects of global supply chain and how easily they can be disrupted, and like how stocks and supplies can be massively disrupted like quite quickly. I think the crisis also outlines the importance of positive action. What we've seen from a lot of organizations is how rapidly they've responded to the crisis, whether it's by transforming their supply chain to provide PPE, to provide this hydrogel, to really support the effort that is ongoing globally to fight this virus. And I think it will also ask broader questions about the resilience of most of the organizations that we have, and how we can further ensure that most of the companies that we have can be more resilient to large global crises of this scale, because it really materializes this type of like kind of deep threat that could in the future, for example, come from like a large environmental crisis.
Yeah, and maybe to add like on the resilience and the business models that we are seeing, maybe, well, it's difficult to say it now without a step back and more time, but we see that clearly business models that do not depend on complex international supply chains are more resilient in this kind of crisis in terms of production and supplies. And on the other side, companies that have multi-channel distribution, including e-commerce and online sales, maybe so not dependent on a few clients selling in brick and mortar stores, for example, if these e-commerce brands can still produce and transport the garments, but their online sales are growing still in this crisis time. So we see different type of business model now at the moment still running and going on. So that can be few things we can look at, even if we need more time to assess the resiliency of the different business models.
Indeed, and I think a lot of us, if not all of us, will resonate with this word that you really mentioned, both of you, which is resilient and resiliency in these cases, that really we are being calling to re-put at the center of the agenda when talking about business models and the more circular business models. So to give us maybe a bit more of a positive outlook, as you were talking about positive actions about these organizations that are undertaken under these stressful times, maybe could you highlight some of the best practices you've seen in the circular textiles sector at the moment, François?
Yeah, there's a lot of examples that we can mention. Maybe we can now on two things, on the product and on the business model side, some of the best practice we've seen. On the product, we've seen some very interesting example last year from, for example, Adidas or MacArthur, exploring with monomaterials products. So how can you focus your material innovation so you can transform a product that can be made like a shoe of 16 different materials into a shoe that's made of only one material while retaining its capabilities and be great for runners? Or how can you create a winter jacket that you can wear in like really polar conditions in just nylon? So those were really great examples. And what was interesting is that the reflection for both those companies went beyond just how can we make a product that is thought in a circular way, that is how it's made, but what can it become, but also thinking about how can you get it back. So not only thinking about, in theory, this product is recyclable, but also thinking about what are some of the measures you can put in place in order to get this product back. For example, MacArthur offered people who bought the jacket to sign up and to actually buy it back from there after 2 years or more, so that they can make sure they can recover the materials. And then on the business model side, we see more and more exploration across the industry on whether it's re-commerce. More and more brands are trying re-commerce aspect, or are looking at refurbishing. Can you like take back some of your stock and put it back again? And there's a company we also work with who is a collector, so it kind of deals with a lot of the materials that are being collected after use. It's Bank and Vogue, and what they do with that is actually try and find value that can be generated with those products, and very innovative with that. That's like partnerships with Converse to create a Converse with like old jeans. They've had also partnerships with a recycler in Scandinavia to basically dissolve those jeans into a new viscose product that then H&M used to make new t-shirts that they've been selling in. So there's loads of great examples of that happening in practice, and actually we see more and more of those becoming with a certain scale and actually being commercial.
Thank you. And it's also coming back to that point that Marion was making about synergies. So it's really encouraging to see that those are happening, and actually at such a large scale. It really means that we are already in something that is only getting bigger and bigger, and that we really have all interest of really making sure we are part of that movement altogether. So at Quadia, we do have a lens for these sector, looking at the textile industry and circular textile in particular. So we have two companies in our portfolio, the Renewal Workshop and Pignatex. So Marion, can you tell us what was the rationale behind and what sets them apart as companies operating in that sector, and how are they driving also the transition in the regenerative economy?
Yeah, so these two companies have a very different position on the value chain, because S&M is producing a new material made from pineapple production waste, and they provide it to many different brands. And the other one, the Renewal Workshop, is a service and a platform to brands to help them being circular by renewing discarded clothes, and putting them back on the market. So they're offering different products and services, and they're on a different position on the value chain, but both are enablers of a circular and regenerative economy in the sector. Both are working with leading players and enabling them to embrace this circularity and to contribute to scale up this circular economy. And I think also, besides having responsible production practices, and they both have in their DNA, in their business model, in their mission, they're willing to contribute to a more a circular ecosystem and sector. So they have like a positive. They have good production practices, also good, very good social practices with workers and other individuals on the value chain. But also they are generating a positive impact for the entire sector. The renewal workshop, thanks to renewing discarded clothes, saved from many clothes from landfills. They have renewed over 40,000 units, and that's the equivalent of over 100 tons of textile waste over the past years. That also means the company enabled savings in terms of virgin resources, water, energy, and chemicals use by avoiding new clothes production. And the same for Ananas Anam. Through the production of Piñatex, they enable to reduce waste from pineapple production fields, and also they limit the use of animal leather, because that's also used as an alternative to animal leather. So they have created a new loop using waste from one sector to resource for another one. So I think they are both remarkable in terms of social and governance practices, and they are both enablers of the circular economy in the sector.
And those seem to be kind of quite pearls or quite gems to be found. Or are there actually other companies of that type that we are looking into in our generic universe of investments in that sector? How does the pipeline look?
So we already mentioned a few of them, but we have been tracking and being connected with over 100 innovative circular companies in Europe and in the US, working in this sector and being enablers all along the value chain. There are the brands which are maybe more visible to the consumers. I can mention EcoArf, but also Mergins, Opal. There are many. But there are also these kind of companies offering circular ways of consuming based on reselling, renewing, repairing, all this business model. So there is renewal workshop, but also we can mention circus renting baby clothes, or all the Lizzie, Dresswing, and other companies enabling and working with these big brands and also retailers to implement these circular business models. Such as Ananas Anam, there are other innovative companies developing new bio-based materials for easy to recycle garments. There are like Alga Life using Algae, Econil, Mycotex using also mushrooms, Pirates developing a new kind of biodegradable textile. Many companies also working on the recycling and end-of-life technologies to develop new yarns. I'm thinking of Infinity Fibers or Resortex, for example. So there are many things already happening, and many innovative companies. Our focus is definitely on circular business models and materials as enablers. And we really want to support these companies that have in their DNA, in their business models, the abilities to contribute to this regenerative and circular economy, while being able to anticipate the rebound effect of this kind of business models. And yeah.
That's very comprehensive, and I think if we have entrepreneurs, so give a show of hands of how that is really encouraging to see how the ecosystem is well and alive. And what would be then the benefits of coming and knocking on our door? You were mentioning supporting, so how is the support? What does the Quadia support look like for that sector?
Well, we bring funding to enable the scale up of these solutions, and I think we bring support in setting up this circular regenerative economy roadmap, these impact objectives based on efficient, useful impact reporting tools. We bring also flexibility in the way we invest, and we support the companies in the long run. And we open, of course, our network and ecosystem to the investees. Our goal is always to create synergies in between all the players and within the ecosystem to accelerate the transformation. As impact investors working with these concepts of regenerative economy, on the governance, also we think we are looking for a positive impact through the entire investment period, all the way to exit to. Our commitment to impact and to the transformation of the sector doesn't stop at the exit of our investment. We really want to think forward and bring also generate value in the, but not only like impact value through the exit.
Thank you. I hope that's that message went across. I just want to quickly answer to someone in the chat. Yes, we will be sending the recordings through the list and also available on social media. So don't worry, you will not be missing any of the very insightful comments we've had so far. And maybe some questions to you, François, to kind of round that up, because we've had tons of questions already incoming. What kind of support can entrepreneurs and companies get from the foundation?
That's a very good question. So the foundation has a lot of different resources that we publish. So everything we create is open source. So by just looking at all the resources that we have on our website, you can already access a lot of tools that we have. We are also increasingly developing online classes and events to be able to share ideas around the circular economy and create networks of people around the circular economy. And the last thing we have probably for innovators and entrepreneurs is what we call our emerging innovator network. So basically, we have quite a large network of corporates from across industry called our C100. And every year we have batches of innovators who join this network to be able to be part of this network of organizations dedicated to the circular economy, bring innovative ideas, connect on the topic, and enjoy a lot of the things that we counter at the foundation.
Thank you. So great support from all sides. I think our entrepreneurs and everyone who's interested will be very well supported in between you two guys. So I'll open the floor to the question. We've received questions by email, so maybe I'll go through those and then we can go into the Q&A, and also we have some questions coming in from the chat. So we had one question that says, apart from the textile sourcing and production itself, a significant amount of single-use plastic is consumed in packaging using polybags to wrap clothes. How are the brands tackling these issues, and what are the ideas to first reduce and then change the way the fashion is using packaging? Any?
Well, there are also many companies innovating on this field, either with new materials, which are easier to recycle, or biodegradable, bio-based too. I can mention Batik working on especially on packaging, especially for retail, and like fashion retail, with material coming from wood fibers. But there are also innovative business models using reusable reusable packaging. For example, Repack, set up a circular business model with this reusable packaging that brands can use as a service. So there are also in this field innovation in terms of materials and business models.
François?
Well, I don't have much to add to what Marion said, beyond the fact that we have at the foundation an ongoing work around plastics packaging. We've had a number of brands from the fashion industry who have joined this work and committed to ensure that by 2025, all the packaging that they use will be reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and are working towards it. The conversation on polybag is quite complicated because today polybags are quite necessary for the way transportation is being organized in order to protect the product for the supply chain, and the existing polybag technology being extremely cheap. The alternatives find it quite challenging to fight on the price-based comparison. So there's a lot of different challenges to be solved. And then what happens when they reach the kind of end destination of the clothing? So when they're in a logistics center or warehouse or wherever, how can you collect them and direct them towards the appropriate next solution? Because if you create something that's biodegradable but actually ends up in a landfill, you're not really achieving the biodegradability. So there's a lot of like systemic question that needs to be solved for that to work at scale.
Yeah, and also I think maybe not a clear understanding of all the implication and aspects on this topic. So it's sometimes a bit confusing.
So the next question would be, how can impact investors, so we're talking about us, have an impact in terms of influencing brands' business models to address these challenges? For example, demanding brands to produce fewer clothes. What are concrete examples demands Quadia has done or has seen in the market?
So I think we already explained what we our support and work with renewable and Astadjam, and what are the angle they have taken to address these challenges and to enable the circular economy. We as we said before, the main challenge is the overconsumption of clothes, and then how we use and how we wear clothes, and until the end of life of the garment. So I think it's, as we said before, it's produced less and produced better. So it's not only one solution, and I guess it also needs different angles and different business models to address the complexity of the problem.
So I hope Leah, I think, who addressed that question, if you'd like to have more elements, please let us know. Otherwise, we're going to the next question, which is the luxury sector, which we didn't really address. And the question says, would you consider that luxury fashion could be a model of more sustainable business model, as they seem to produce better and less? François, would you like to start? And then
yeah, I can share some thoughts about that. I think fundamentally when you look at the fashion industry overall, the underpinning model is somewhat similar. If you want to grow your business, you need to make more and sell more. And so fundamentally, all businesses that are involved through the fashion industry are actually manufacturing and putting products with an incentive of putting ever more products on the market. For luxury, there's this idea of, well, actually scarcity contributes to the appeal of luxury. So there's a limitation towards what you can do. But when you look at companies like Dior today, Dior's fashion revenue are like over 2 billion. And all those companies are today multi-billion companies. So they are actually putting a lot of materials on the market. So they need to also take action towards making sure that the garment they're making can be used more and longer. And the great news about that is actually because those luxury products maintain their value longer, they are actually offering a much more direct business case for re-commerce. And we've seen that with the growth of luxury consignment being much more prominent than in other sectors. The other aspect of that is we need to make sure that circular economy and sustainability is something that is available for everyone and not just for the lucky few who can afford luxury. So there's a conversation to have about how can we create a circular model that is actually providing choice, enjoyment, desirability for everyone and not just the people who can afford luxury products.
Marion, would you like to complement?
No, I fully agree with last comment of François, and when these circular business models need to bring value for everyone on the value chain, including the consumers, and make accessible this circular fashion to everyone.
So I will go to the next question that he's talking. I think it touches bases on what you were saying earlier, François, about, or both of you actually were mentioning how regulation is coming into play to stop this waste issue and the different issues the industry is posing. And the question is now, do you see novel public-private partnership models to support this emerging circular ecosystem?
I don't necessarily have an example that springs to mind, but I think it's a great idea to explore. Mm-hmm. I think there's enormous opportunities in public-private partnership to like develop infrastructure amongst other things. But I don't have a specific example to share.
Mm-hmm. But a good nugget of exploration, and maybe for our next webinar next year we'll come with different case studies already. That question triggered. Marion, would you like to?
No, I don't have any example either.
That's our homework for next year, I guess. Fashion Revolution Week 2021. So we have a lot of questions that go. I'm just going to group everything about how we are, the garments are being discarded, and how do we make sure that it is then taken care of properly. So I'll take that question that seems to be summarized. The garments that are hugely discarded, are they largely discarded by the end consumer or the brand prior to retail? Where is that waste generated, in your opinion?
So there's
a. Oh, go ahead, Marion.
Go ahead, François.
There's the vast majority of the garments that are being discarded are discarded after the use phase. There is an amount of clothing that is never sold, and that inventory today, for example, in France, talking about legislation, you in 2021, you won't be able to destroy it anymore. But in often cases, there's that inventory that needs to be managed, but the vast majority of the waste comes from clothing that's been sold and used.
Yeah, I had to we know that in average per person per year in Europe, everyone like in average, and we use or we buy 26 kilos of textiles, and we discard 11 kilos in average per person every year. So definitely there is a large gap here, and actually the inventory, and it's a really current question and challenge for the sector, because there will be huge in unsold inventory because of the current situation and the COVID-19 outbreak. And so that's a big question, what and how the brands will manage the inventory, and I think can be an opportunity for circular business models too.
Thank you. I hope that those will be were taken into account, also as elements of answer. Then we have two very technical actually questions in the chat, if I'm going to that side, which say, I'll read the first one: what shall we weavers be doing, having millions of meters left overs from cancellations from European and US brands? We need to recover the losses too. How will this, in your opinion, affect all sustainable efforts in Europe?
I think that's a very challenging question, and I don't think I have a proper answer to offer to how can the losses be recovered. It's the crisis itself is kind of causing losses across the entire industry, and it's got dramatic effect on actors around the supply chain. What there is what we see more and more is an interest in using some of that fabric to create masks and other type of personal protective equipment, especially for non-medical applications. So that could potentially be an application for some of those products. I think when it comes to the question around sustainability efforts, with this crisis, what we'll be able to potentially see better is how close to the core of the business's sustainability is. Because in terms of hardship, what businesses do is shed fat in a way. You know, you remove the least important or the lowest priority progressively to really focus on the core. And the more central conversations are or actions are around sustainability, circular economy, the harder it will be to remove them. And so that will enable us to see what that means. And the other aspect is also we'll be able to witness or assess how much more resilient and economically sustainable businesses who have that sustainability quite close to their core will be through those times of hardship. But obviously, it's probably going to postpone some actions by quite some time due to supply chain disruptions and due to like reorganization of collections and work. But we've seen, for example, a number of companies coming through reinforcing their sustainability plans in recent weeks, with companies like Outerknown, Nordstrom, Burberry just launching a capsule of garments that are made sustainably, etc. So I think we're going to see like those two tiers, companies who have that close to their center will keep on pushing forward. The others might find it a bit more challenging.
Marion, elements to complement?
Nothing to add. Everything was said.
Just a complementary group of speakers. We have overpassed our time over here. I think the rest of the questions have been mostly addressed. I'm just checking between the chats and our Q&A. Unfortunately, because we have so fast overdue, I wouldn't want to take any more time from our speakers, but also from our audience. But for sure, I will address these questions with our speakers, who can reply to them in the by writing, and then I'll share that in the follow-up of that webinar. Thank you, all of you, for being here today for this first ever Quadia webinar. That was very exciting to have both specialists really guide us through the steps and through the solutions, which is what I really liked about what you all said. Kept it quite positive, even though the current situation might lead us to be more pessimistic maybe, but I can see that there are solutions already, and that are just maybe sometimes needing to be scaled up or even more emerging because of the opportunities that those challenges that we've talked about at the beginning were posing. So thank you so much, Marion. Thank you so much, François, for all your elements of answer. Thank you for the whole audience and your interactivity and your questions. If your question was not answered, please be sure that it will be at least addressed in our follow-up email. And I look forward to seeing you in our next webinar very soon. Thank you so much, guys. I wish you a lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.